This is the Heineken Brewery in Amsterdam, the city where I was born. You can tour it if you're a visitor, walk through the rooms, see the tanks, learn the whole story. If you're Dutch, you've probably seen the old ads, the ones that talk about craftsmanship and mastery, and the one everyone remembers, where four men are shown a new house. The main feature? A walk-in closet full of Heineken bottles. They lose it completely and start shouting and laughing like they've just found the big trove treasure. To the Dutch, Heineken isn't a novelty, it's a national symbol. It's something we grew up with. That's why it stood out when my friend John came to visit us in Vancouver. He picked up a Canadian Heineken, took a sip, and paused and said, "Hey, this tastes different. What's in this?" Hey, hoi! From nanochips to nuclear subs. Bet you didn't know these were Dutch. Welcome to the Dutch door. Let's check it out. Ga je mee? In 1516, in Bavaria, a law was passed called the Reinheitsgebot. It's considered the oldest food safety regulation still in effect in the world, and it said something incredibly simple. Beer can only be made from four things: water, malt, hops, and yeast. That's it. Nothing else, no preservatives, no artificial flavors, no shortcuts, just four ingredients and the skill of the brewer. The Netherlands isn't Germany, and the Dutch aren't bound by the Reinheitsgebot. But the philosophy is the same across much of Europe. Beer purists believe that anything beyond those four ingredients isn't beer anymore. Heineken, brewed in the Netherlands, follows that tradition. Four ingredients, and they use what they call A yeast. Heineken has used the same yeast strain since 1886. They called it A yeast because it was a strain that gave them the cleanest, slightly bitter, dry lager taste they wanted. They've kept it alive ever since, so every batch of Heineken anywhere in the world is fermented with this yeast that traces back to that original culture. My father was a Dutch baker, and he used to say the biggest mistake North Americans made was rushing the rise, using bread improvers to make things go faster. It cut back on taste and quality and structure. Beer works much the same way. Budweiser, 13, maybe 14 days from start to finish. Miller Lite and Coors Light, 3 to 4 weeks, but they're using shortcuts, corn syrup, rice, to speed things up. Heineken takes 28 days because they're not cutting any corners. That's slow beer, traditional beer, pure beer. And purists will tell you that's what beer is supposed to be. Anything less than that is a compromise, a shortcut, a fake. But to understand how far we've drifted from that purity, let's look at one beer that tells the whole story. A beer that started out authentic, got discovered by tourists, and then got bought out by the largest brewing corporation in the world. A beer that Mexicans themselves won't drink anymore. Corona was first brewed in 1925 by Grupo Modelo in Mexico City. It was a working class beer. Mexicans drank it, and it was really truly theirs. Then, in the 70s and 80s, something changed. American tourists started discovering it. That clear bottle, the lime wedge ritual, the beach aesthetic. Corona became the beer you drank on vacation, and Grupo Modelo leaned into that hard. By 1997, Corona had surpassed Heineken as the top-selling imported beer in the United States. It wasn't Mexican beer anymore, not in the way it started. It was tourist beer. And back in Mexico, a lot of locals just stopped drinking it. In 2013, Anheuser-Busch InBev, the largest brewing corporation in the world, bought Grupo Modelo for $20 billion. Corona stopped being a Mexican product altogether and became a global one. The recipe now includes corn and rice, cheaper, faster alternatives to traditional barley malt. And that's what strips out the complexity and leaves you with something sweeter, thinner, something that, to a European palate, isn't really beer at all. In North America, brewers are not required to list ingredients on the label. Unless a company chooses to tell you what's inside the bottle, you have no idea what you're drinking. And most companies don't volunteer that information. But when people started digging anyways, they found patterns. Miller Coors adds corn syrup directly into the brewing process for Miller Lite and Coors Light. Anheuser-Busch uses rice in the mash for Bud Light. Michelob Ultra and Modelo Especial follow the same logic. Corn and rice replace barley malt because they're cheaper, faster, and easier to control. That corn syrup gets fermented out during brewing, so it isn't sitting in your glass as sugar, but it still changes the beer. Malted barley gives beer depth, bitterness, and body. Replace it with simple sugars, And what you're left with is something thinner, something a bit smoother, something that tastes sweeter by comparison, and something that, to a European palate, doesn't really taste like beer. Then there's BHA. It's a preservative added to keep beer stable on shelves for longer, to slow oxidization and protect it during storage and transport. Once it's in your body, it doesn't just pass through, it accumulates over time like rust building up inside a pipe. Over years, that buildup can damage cells in ways linked to cancer. The European Union classifies BHA as a suspected endocrine disruptor. That sounds scary, and it is. Japan has banned it outright. In the United States, the FDA still considers it generally recognized as safe, a designation that hasn't been meaningfully reviewed in decades. And this is the part that really matters, is if you put water, barley, hops, and yeast on a table, most people wouldn't hesitate to have a bite or a sip. But if you put a vial of BHA next to them and say, hey, this goes in your beer so it can sit on the shelf longer, no one would drink it. The only reason people accept it, because they're never asked. Cigarette packages have warnings on them. Big ones. They tell you smoking causes cancer. But your beer? Nothing. No warning, no ingredient list. You have no idea it's even in there. Let's talk about that Heineken green bottle, because it's kind of interesting. Beer is sensitive to light. When hops are exposed to ultraviolet light, they break down and produce a chemical compound that smells almost exactly like skunk spray. Scientists call it being light struck. People call it skunked. It's incredibly potent. You can detect it in concentrations as low as 1 part per billion. Brown bottles block out the light that causes this reaction. Green bottles do not. So why does Heineken keep using that green bottle? Because it's their brand. That green glass with a red star is instantly recognizable. Change the bottle to brown and you lose the image they've spent a century building. So your Heineken ships across the Atlantic in a bottle that makes it vulnerable to the exact thing that would ruin it. By the time it reaches the shelf in Vancouver or Toronto, it may have already changed. But Heineken decided that protecting the brand image was more important than protecting the beer. And yet, even with that compromise, Heineken is still brewed with its 4 ingredients, still follows the Dutch tradition, still takes 28 days. Perhaps it's not perfect, but it's closer to what purists would call real beer than most of what's on North American shelves. There is another layer to this difference, and it has less to do with brewing and more to do with taste, because over time, tastes have changed. In much of Europe, people are used to bitterness and intensity. Espresso is a really good example. It's small, strong, gives you an immediate jolt. People drink it straight, no milk, no sugar. It's not meant to be gentle. The same is true for wine. French and Spanish wines often lean dry, acidic, or tannic. A Rioja can feel raw when you're not used to it. Ribeira del Duero might be smoother, but it still carries weight. Chocolate works much in the same way. In Europe, darker chocolate is common. More cocoa, less sweetness. Bitterness is part of the appeal. Beer developed alongside those tastes. Bitterness from hops wasn't something to be masked, it was expected. In North America, the palate shifted in a different direction. Smoother, sweeter, less sharp. Not worse, just different. Food and drink increasingly moved toward approachability, sweetness, toward flavors that don't demand an adjustment. That change didn't happen because people stopped liking bitter flavors. It happened because beer that bothered fewer people sold better, so breweries made more of that. So when a Dutch beer tastes sharper or more bitter, it's not trying to prove anything. It just says, hey, beer has tasted this way for a long time, and people just never stopped drinking it that way. In places like the Lower Mainland of Vancouver, Canada, especially along Brewers Row in Port Moody, new artisan breweries are popping up. They're doing something that looks kind of old-fashioned on purpose. They're making beer that doesn't need chemical help to survive 6 months under fluorescent lights. Many of them study brewing in Belgium, Germany, or the Netherlands, where beer is left alone longer. They let it ferment for more time. They don't add stabilizers. They don't add preservatives like BHA. They don't try to force every batch to taste exactly the same so the beer can change a little from one batch to the next. These beers don't last as long and they don't travel as far. They're not identical, but people love them. They line up for them. They buy them fresh, and many of these beers now sit in the liquor stores next to the big brands. And here's where people split. Some people care a lot about how beer is made. They want just the 4 ingredients. They don't want additives, they don't like preservatives. They want beer to taste like beer, even if that means it costs a bit more or doesn't travel well. Other people don't care about any of that. They just want something cold or cheap or easy to drink. They're not thinking about ingredients, they're just thinking about that fun moment. And then there's kind of a middle ground where beer becomes about image. That's what happened with Corona. It turned into a tourist beer, something visitors drank and locals moved on. That happens everywhere. People don't usually drink the things that outsiders come to see. But maybe the real question isn't which side is right. It's this. When you pick a beer, what are you actually choosing? Is it taste? Is it strength? Is it price? Is it something dark or something light, something familiar, or something that reminds you of a place? And maybe you don't drink alcohol at all and you only care about flavor. Maybe you just want the most alcohol for your money. So, which one are you?